Kank. Kank.
That's weird. I didn't hear the music this time.
You didn't?
I saw the countdown, but there was no soaring violins of Nibelung.
Did you like mute yourself or something like that? I don't know.
No, I don't know.
We can play it again.
Yeah, but you should just have that constantly like going along in the background.
You know, there's some people that keep a kind of a background noise in their shows. I don't think we're going to do that because, you know, our dulcet tones are so much more interesting. Guys, welcome back. You ready? You ready for it? You know, I got to do it. Well, hello. And welcome back to Pencil to Pencil, your favorite pandemic podcast brought to you weekly on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. EST. Exactly. The podcast that loves you back. My name is JAMAR Nicholas. I'm a cartoonist, author, illustrator. I have a series at Scholastic on the graphics imprint called Leon the Extraordinary. I'm very happy to say that I just turned in my art for the next volume, which will be in your hands next year around this time. I'm very excited.
Next year?
I know.
What am I going to do till then?
You know, one of the wildest things about all of this is that, you know, it takes us a long time to draw this stuff and to create these things. And then the kids get it and they go, where's the next one?
Well, whose fault is that?
Sorry, I need to draw 2 books a year, apparently.
That's right. It needs to be twice as thick, 3 times as thick, like yay thick, like just so like
thick.
900 pages.
I know, I love it. I really wasn't ready for how voracious the appetite of the young readers were, but it's a good thing. Those are good problems. And I don't do this by myself, you guys. I am joined here at the proverbial hip by 2 of my bestest friends. You may know him as the world heavyweight champion of webcomics. I know him as Stone Cold Steve CONLEY. What's up, Steve CONLEY? Tell him what's up.
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. It's good to see you both. Mike, you're looking very crisp. Your camera is all...
It's so crisp.
Yeah, I don't have any fingerprints over it yet or anything. Yeah.
IMAX Manley. It's pretty great.
I like that. IMAX Manley. Steve, don't deflect. What are you known for?
Folks can find me online at middleagecomic.com. I write and draw the webcomic The Middle Age, which is free to read online on Webtoons, Tapas, Go Comics, and my own website. And I also do TTRPG stuff nowadays, including Intoximancy and Death Dealing, which is the latest one. If you go to intoximancy.com or deathdealing.com, stuff, if you play D&D, some 5e stuff for you. But I write and draw the whole thing. It's all set in the world of my comic, so it's all tied together.
Wow, that's fantastic. And Steve,
that's not all you do.
No, he does more. He's also a spy, but we don't want to blow his cover here on the podcast. Steve, you've been doing such a great job. Would you like to introduce our friend here?
Yeah, well, I have to go back though. I have to introduce you.
No, just do Mike.
Oh, you sure?
Oh no, you were going to. Yeah, do me too. Do me too. Pause.
JAMAR Nicholas, cartoonist, scientist, searching for a way to tap into the hidden strength that all humans have. Then an accidental overdose of Kirby Crackle altered his body chemistry. JAMAR Nicholas. And then we have the Tower of Power, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, the maestro of mark making, Mr. Mike Manley.
Hey, all hail the Monsignor Manley. Hello, Mike. Mike, what's on your table right now?
A bunch of pencils, actually. I just started the next week of the Phantom. In fact, right before podcast, I sent the first strip off to Liang to ink the backgrounds.
Wow. And I don't know how you got this far and you don't know the legend of Michael Manley. Mike Manley is a dyed-in-the-wool comic illustrator extraordinaire. co-creator of Darkhawk at Marvel Comics. You have a lot of Darkhawk fans, Mike, and that's got to surprise you. Maybe still at this point when you go to shows and people are like, "You're my childhood."
That actually was a comment that I got, as I was telling Steve earlier today. That's a comment I got earlier today on my Instagram because I posted a couple Batman 500 pages, and literally that was somebody's comment. Like, I remember when I was like 9 years old, and so yeah, that says, you know, it's fun, and it's sort of strange to think like, oh, that person's probably, you know, I was only 10, they were 9, but I was only 10 when I did it, you know.
Yeah, you were like the Doogie Howser of comic books.
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of, I mean, that's what comics is all about too, is about sort of nostalgia. We all had nostalgia for stuff that we loved, and now our fans have nostalgia. 15 years, some kid's going to come up to you, Jamar, and go, you know, hey, I remember that first Leon, you know. You'll just be a head in a bottle then, but
just a floating head in a jar. Yeah,
right.
They'll be reading it to their kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, you know, this is interesting, guys. Right before we went on, I was checking my Instagram, and somebody had posted. I think they're holding up a copy of Leon the Extraordinary, and it had all the markings from their local library. I think it was in Portland, and the person said, "Just finished reading my 9-year-old daughter her first graphic novel."
Mouse.
The next image is Mouse and Leon. Isn't that wild, man? You know, just changing the world here as we go. But you know, all that to say is that you guys, I think we have a lot of new eyeballs tonight. What happens here is that you get to talk to three expert cartoonists. Probably between the three of us, there's over 90 years of experience in comics. And once in a while, we have special guests on, like tonight. Our good friend Sean Damien Hill is going to be joining us for a nice conversation. I'm very excited. And when we do have guests, we like to mix it up. We want to have conversations with people who are kind of changing the algorithm, or like, you know, change agents, or people who are just like doing really interesting stuff, or come from the past where, you know, they moved a lot of needles. And I think Sean is one of those people. We talked quickly in the green room, and Steve, not to put your business out there, but Steve was like, it was really cool to watch you talk to Sean, and just about the mutual love between you guys. What is it, Steve? How does it feel to you to be a part of this podcast and be able to talk to, you know, other luminaries in the field, or maybe people you hadn't met before the podcast?
I really like it. I love the opportunity. I appreciate you guys having me as a unnecessary third wheel. I appreciate it. I really, just speaking about Sean specifically, I think I must have connected with him on Facebook. I don't know, maybe close to 10 years ago or something. It feels like it might have been. The last 3 years are a blur, but just watching his progress as an artist, not only that, and also his acceptance as an artist. That's something to see in a creator's career, where they're, you know, you like, oh wow, this person's great, but you just have no faith in the system. And to see that talent kind of wear I'm not sure if it wore the system down, or the system just sort of the stars aligned, and it just to see that kind of path, that trajectory, it's just great to see. And being in a position to shine a spotlight on some people that maybe people don't need a spotlight. Having a Joe on a couple of weeks ago certainly doesn't need any more. 1,000 more subscribers. Our lovely 1,000 subscribers aren't necessarily going to change his metrics, but it's just great. It's great, and the conversation's fantastic, and the perspective the three of us have is varied enough. So I think it really makes things even more interesting.
I love it. So, I want to bring Sean in, but let me just give some rules of the road tonight. This is live, you guys. I know a lot of, and I said this to Sean, I know a lot of people aren't really ready for live, right? A lot of us do interviews as kind of part of the language of doing this stuff as a professional. But sometimes it's like, well, wait a minute. There's no net. Like I just gotta start talking and anything can happen. That kind of throws some people off. But Sean's ready to go. He reached out to his fans and his audience, and they're excited. So I'm excited to talk to him. So let me clear the screen a little bit. Are you ready for the KK? We're going to render him. Welcome to Pencil, Sean Damien Hill.
Hi, how's it going?
Well, you're still rendering. Oh, there you go.
Oh,
Look at that. What's up, Sean? How are you? Man?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
All right. Hopefully, we didn't talk too much and bore you to tears while you were waiting to come on.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Awesome. So, all right. So we're gonna just have a nice conversation. Anybody that's watching live, if you have anything you'd like to ask Sean specifically, or myself, Steve, or Mike, put it in the chat. I can't guarantee we'll get it on, but if it's timely and adds to our conversation, I'll do my best. Mike, you want to start the ball rolling?
Well, Sean and I were just talking a little bit right before we went on about the differences in the bullpen, and how, like I said, I don't think I've been to Marvel since the mid '90s. But how there was a lot of things you would observe and learn and pick up every time you would go into the office. So, have you ever been to the bullpen?
No. It's to be honest, like when I was a kid, I used to I had a mentor who was a comic artist, and he said I think he had been there once with a friend of his or something like that, and he told me about all these different artists. Literally, there's in one area of the offices, and they're all just kind of working on books and stuff like that, or making corrections or whatever. And as a kid, I always imagined just being there and working and all that stuff. I don't know what it would look like now. Like in my mind, I'm thinking it would just be a bunch of people with laptops and just making like regular minute edits to different pages and stuff like that.
Just
I'm not
typing,
even sure.
Furiously typing,
Control Alt Delete.
Yeah. Well, there were certainly no computers then. I think because '94 I got my first laptop, but I don't remember seeing any computers the last time I was at Marvel. And that was probably just when it was starting and going over to the desktop publishing and slowly integrating all that. So have you ever been to DC?
No. Well, I've done work for them, but I've never been to the physical office. I mean, they're in California now, right? I've definitely been to New York. I've never been to California. Besides, just as a closest I've ever been to California is maybe a layover in Seattle. that was about it.
Okay.
So you've never been to Comic-Con, Sean?
No. I've been to New York Comic-Con, just never.
Not to San
Never
Diego.
the West Coast. Yeah.
That's not to say that's interesting. Like, that's interesting. You've been to Comic-Con, but I think that's been such a part of the background of doing the stuff in comics that
the lore.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of surprising to hear. But I had been saying this for a long time. When New York Comic-Con kind of got its footing and it turned into a thing, that the need to be at San Diego lessened a lot. Like I know a lot of cats who used to go to San Diego just kind of stopped once New York happened, because it just was, made it, the energy was almost the same. It's not the same in volume, but the energy, just even the New York energy was like enough to kind of get that fixed. Maybe we talk about that for a second. Do you do a lot of conventions? I mean, we're on the other end of this pandemic thing, but before that,
and I would do them seldomly. I'm like one of the worst planners in the world, so it's like actually like stopping and thinking about when I'm going to plan to actually get stuff together for a convention is like, I just never think about it. I've become too much of a workhorse. Like I just stay tied to my desk and I never leave. Like I have no idea. Like when I made the post about this interview, I had no idea how many people would like respond to it. I have no idea like how many fans I have and stuff like that. I just I rarely think about it.
And right before oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
You were saying that you were just working on something right before we joined the stream tonight. Can you say what you were working on?
Oh yeah. So I'm on the Bishop War College miniseries, and I'm literally working on the last book of the series. I'm down to like last 4 panels. And,
oh wow!
I'm probably gonna be up all night, but
congratulations.
That's when you can
Thank
smell it, right? You're so close to finishing, you can smell it in the air. Like I just gotta get through it. That's such a
previous pages I was just getting through crying, but it was the rest of this seems like it's gonna be okay.
So well, one of the things that we do here on the podcast is try to get an idea of how you got into the business, as we so originally call it, your origin story, Sean. So maybe if you want to tell us a little bit about kind of what led you into comics, or maybe some early loves that brought you to the industry, and kind of how you got in, if you'd like to share that with us.
Absolutely. So I was kind of indoctrinated in the comics, honestly. Like my grandfather was super into them. My mother was super into them. And so like we would literally go to comic book stores just to pick up books and stuff like that. And my mom was noticing like I was like being lazy about actually like getting in the habit of reading more. And so she would use comics as a way to just kind of cajole me on and be like, hey, wouldn't it be interesting if you knew what Thor was doing? And and that kind of started the little comic bug in me, and it just kind of never let me go since. So it's as far as like drawing them though, the like full transparency, I didn't think about like drawing comics until like maybe that Rob Liefeld Levi 401 commercial with the jeans. Yeah,
that changed everything.
Spike Lee commercial. Yeah, and I was just like, this guy's sitting here just drawing comics. This is amazing. I want to do
Did
that.
it make you want the jeans? Did the commercial?
I did get the jeans, and I just it made no sense to me. I was like, why are these buttons? Like I don't.
He couldn't draw zippers. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And I think that's a really interesting kind of like point. And I have so many what's really cool about this show, but one of the things that I really find striking is that between the guests, or even the different kind of like generations of cartoonists that we are, we can kind of find an entry point that's different for everybody. And I'm sure Mike has things to say about that point in time. But I remember I was probably like in college when all that image stuff started. But I just remember this energy that I didn't remember, or I never saw before. And people were just all of a sudden really excited about comic books, and it was like that 80, 88 to 90, and things were popping, and I was really into it. And I couldn't wait to see what was next. So when, the image guys kind of turned into rock stars, and just like, wow, this is sexy. And comics weren't sexy before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm not surprised that people were like, wow, what's that? And how do you get into it? And also remember, they had those VHS tapes for the comic.
Yeah.
What was it called? Not Comic Maestros or something like that.
Yeah, they were sitting down with Stanley and stuff. And
Yeah,
they're
and
drawing.
Stan was just roasting people while they were trying to draw
Yeah, yeah.
the whole time. He's like, perhaps you'd like to put on some feet with that drawing. So were you also drawn into comics from the rest of the things that were swirling around, like Wizard magazine, or going to the drugstore and seeing like comic books being like displayed in a different way? Or was it just mainly the beginning of Image for you?
No, I definitely remembered those guys from Marvel when before they branched out.
Hmm.
Like Jim Lee's X-Men is still like, in my mind, that's still like my definitive X-Men.
Hmm.
It's literally it's probably the first book I bought with my own money. Like I think I
Hmm.
would like rag my mom to buy me this book or that book, but like when I
Hmm.
earned a little change of my own, I was just like, man, I'm getting this one. And I think it was a reprint. It was probably like it's like I remember it being like the full on fold out cover and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
I think there were only a few left. And so I was like, man, I got to get this one. This looks amazing.
Gotta cop
Um, yeah.
it.
And I think that book made me fall in love with the Magneto character because I think that character was pretty well featured in that first
Hmm.
issue.
Hmm.
Even to this day, like the way Jim Lee depicted that character in my mind is still like, it's probably it's like equivalent to somebody's Neil Adams Batman
Right.
to
Hmm.
someone. So,
Hmm.
Now, how
um,
old were you when you got that?
oh man, I was probably like I don't even remember. I was probably like 8 or 9,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I was just hanging in there, and I definitely remember like my grandfather really like waiting for us to go impatiently. It was just like, okay, like because he had his stuff and it was just like, you got to make a decision. Let's go.
So
Um,
Sean, was you said your grandfather, right? Was that
yeah, yeah.
did you have a comic book store in your town that you went to, or where were you getting comics from?
So I grew up in Washington D.C. So there was Big Planet Comics in Georgetown, and then there was Jeppy's over in Silver Spring,
Oh,
and
hmm.
this is before he took over the distribution stuff and became a god and all that. But it was I'm pretty sure I got the Jim Lee book over at Jeppy's. Pretty
Uh,
sure I got it there.
in that, and I don't want to speak about stuff I don't know about, but just from doing Baltimore Comic Con and having a lot of really great relationships in the DMV area with shop owners and stuff. It seems like that's if I could say, like DC and Maryland and Virginia is like a comic book corridor. Does that
It
feel
is.
right? And Steve also,
Yeah.
you would know a little bit about that too. It seems like everybody in that space is really in the comics, which just seemed like it was a little more spread out. Like I'm from Philly, and you had to know somebody to know where the comic book store was. S-
Sort of. I mean, so DC has like a lot in it that it doesn't advertise, that it's not necessarily known for, and there are a lot of comic creators in this area. It's just not as known for it as like places like New York used to be, or like Portland is now, and stuff like that. So,
yeah, yeah, Portland's
um,
a bit of a hotbed
yeah.
right now. So Sean, let me ask you some more questions. Maybe a little bit about your comics education. Did you go to school for art in any stripe, or did you learn it in the streets? Like, how
Oh,
did you learn to do comics?
yeah. No, I had a lot of help. So when I was around the 8, 10 year old mark, um, I was drawing a lot. My grandfather actually he drew a lot, but he didn't
Hmm.
draw comics a whole bunch. He like drew like portraits on his spare time. It wasn't his job at all. Um, and so I got introduced to a mentor. His name's Kofi Tice. He was he's an artist that lived in DC, pretty much owned his own greeting card business, and he would use that greeting card business to kind of push a lot of his art and stuff like that. And so I was introduced to him at a young age, and I think it was just because, you know, I was growing up in the proverbial, you know, troubled area where kids always got into some kind of nonsense and stuff like that. So it was my art teacher's deterrent to be like, you know, it was like, no, this kid, like, actually, you know,
Mm-hmm.
he might be able to, if he just sticks to this, he might be able to avoid all the other nonsense that his friends are doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I got introduced to him. He kind of took me under his wing. He's practically like a father to me, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, he practically raised me.
Yeah.
He did encourage me to go to like an arts high school, so I went to Duke Ellington School of the Arts, and
Shout out to Duke Ellington.
yeah, yeah,
I have some friends who came from, and Dave Chappelle was at Duke Ellington too.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think around that time I was like letting go of the drawing comics dream and just thinking, well, maybe I'll just grow up and be a painter or something like that. So I focused real heavily in the fine art stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
I think around like I got out of high school, I was gonna take a year off, like a year and a half off, get a regular job, and you know, and just get ready for college. And um, got into college, did it for about over a year and a half, almost 2 years, and then I just got burnt out. Just like, oh, I don't want to do this,
Yeah.
and I dropped out, and I barely did any art, like, seriously, for a good while. I think it was, I don't know how many years it was now, but really, if not for my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, like, I probably would not have tried, you know, gearing towards
Mm.
comics again. I
Wow.
probably
Huh.
wouldn't have.
So you had a couple of kind of drop offs, we'll call it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what and was that? And I could get a little hippy dippy here, but like, was some of that coming from you just feeling like things weren't happening fast enough? Like, what was frustrating to you about it, or trying to break in, or not feeling like you needed to be where you were at the time?
Um,
Any
I,
feelings
th-
about that?
I think when I had the idea that I was just going to be some kind of artist, some kind of painter, that I just didn't have a clear
Yeah.
idea of what that looked like for me. Um, I didn't have a clear understanding of like um what I wanted to say in that kind of field. And I had this like, and fine art, like when you're in school, like you get really kind of pigeon-toed into thinking that when you do some kind of art, it can't just be for fun. No, it has to be world changing, and it has to change culture around you completely, you know, and all that stuff. You have to like reach into the hearts of men and change who they are fundamentally with your art and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And so, you know, a lot of that just I couldn't honestly say at the time that I had anything that I wanted to paint or draw that would do that. And so, and I was, I just wanted to draw something fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just looking, I was like, well, I'm in college, you know, I'm going to pay all this money just to draw stuff that I don't even believe in. And I could just be at home in my sketchbook and just be happy.
Huh.
So I think, I
No,
think
that's.
that's where I was.
I think that's really interesting, and I don't want to just take over the conversation, but
Oh, no,
I
no,
said
no.
it's something that we kind of touched on, and something that I like to ask a lot of the guests is kind of like, was there a period? Everybody has a story where they jumped off of the proverbial cliff of some sort. What jumped you? What made you jump into action, or there was a moment in time. But also, we don't talk enough about resistance, and I'm
Mhm.
sure all of us when we were younger knew a bunch of people who wanted to do something and they did not do it. You know what I mean? And that still lives with them. But there's something very special about us in a case that we're doing. We wrote this thing out, and I think it's really remarkable that you just mentioned that you were at that point where you're like, yeah, no, this isn't fun anymore, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of people who are like maybe enthusiasts or maybe hobbyists kind of just get to that point and then just realize it's not worth the what is it? What do they say? The squeeze isn't worth. It's not worth the squeeze. That's what they say.
Yeah.
Mike, can you talk to that a little bit? I mean, just even from teaching or going back to school and just seeing how you can kind of read it in people if they have it, or they might not go the distance if they're pushed a little bit. I don't know. It's just interesting.
Well, I suppose going back to school at 45, really going to art school, because I went to art school when I was 19 for like a year, and then I stopped. And then I didn't go back until I was 45. And so going back, older, mature, having already had a career, I was friends with people who were, 20 years younger, coming right out of high school, experiencing very much what you were, Sean, which is that you go out, you have your 4 years. So your first year, you mess around. At the school I went to, you got to do printmaking, sculpting, painting, drawing. And then your second year, you choose your major. Your third year, you get your studio. Fourth year, you graduate. You're just out there changing the world.
Yeah.
And the fact is, most people who are 18, 19, 20 years old have not lived enough of a life to have, and I'm talking about like 95% of the students haven't either lived enough life to have something they want to say, right?
Yeah.
But you're told, yes, you're gonna enter into this whole other racket, which is what fine art is. It's another business, right?
Yeah.
You're told that it's fine art, but actually it's a business because nobody's going to put your work in a gallery unless they can sell it. They're not giving your work to the world because they feel you need the exposure and they need to expose the world to your beautiful work.
Yeah.
And so what you described is sort of what happened to me in the beginning, and sort of what happened to a lot of people is they would go, they go, well, I should go to art school. And then at some point, many of the people, when I went between first and second year, and then second and third year, would drop out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot to put on a person to say that you're going, you have these it was a critic-based program. So they're trying to get you to, you're studying art, you're studying history of art, but not everybody has a very powerful voice at that point. Maybe you're just trying to figure out how to go to the art gym, as I call it, and build up your skill. So when you say, I want to do this, you actually have the skill to express yourself. But again, when you're 19 or you're 20, most people don't have anyone in their family that was an artist. Especially, like I taught an after-school program that had a lot of kids from the Black community come in, and I would do portfolio days when I taught a DCAD. So you have a lot of kids come in who have never been to a museum.
Yeah.
They think they want to be an animator because it looks like it would be a cool thing to do, but so I can see, right. But then like the actual path to doing that is very specific. And if you don't have anybody who's actually walked that path and said, well, here I am on the path, like your mentor, and go, here's a path, because art is a path, right? And then you may find out like, oh, well, I'm not a fine artist. That's not what I want to do. But you have to go far enough down the road to know that's not what you want to do. So I went through that myself because I went for commercial art, but I had already been doing commercial art since I was 15. So it's like I wasn't learning the things I wanted to do, so I dropped out of school. So it sounds like a similar thing where like you weren't really doing what you wanted to do, and we want it to be fun. I mean, that's the whole reason why you want to do art, right? You want it to be fun. So I know that, and it's a very common thing. The major difference is that now it's 30, 40, 50, 60 $1,000 a year to figure that out. And then by the time you've done 3 years, and I know this as a teacher, I've had students come to me on their third year and go, this is not really what you did. This is not really what I want to do. I want to go do something else. And I said, that's a great thing, because if you can figure out what the other thing is, that's awesome, rather than keep going on and spending all this money. So.
Yeah. And actually, so the funny thing is my wife, she was going to school for animation at the time we were dating. So I knew I didn't want to do animation because I saw what they were doing in there. And I was like, this might be a lazy artist, but I was like, this is insane. Like I would literally see her work on something for like hours on end, just for like less than a minute of animation. I'd just be like, this is madness. I ain't like this.
But I think that's a really important thing for artists to know early on in your journey, right? Because I had friends that thought they wanted to be animators and then thought they wanted to be illustrators, but they really had the personality of a fine artist, right? And again, most people in their life don't have somebody who is a cartoonist or a painter, who can disperse with a little wisdom, So you were very fortunate that you had that mentor who could say, even if you looked at his work and go, well, that's not what I want to do, you could actually see somebody who made a career, did something.
Yeah. No, I was extremely lucky. I don't think I would have been doing this now if I hadn't known him.
So how did you get back to did you put on your 501 jeans one day and like, that's it?
Yeah.
That's it.
Plus one jeans of drawing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Jeans of drawing plus one to charisma. Yeah.
Like, this is how the buttons work. Okay. I mean, really, yeah, no, it was just my wife. Like, she was really pushing, because she was when I was drawing in my sketchbook and stuff like that, it would always be like, fun, almost comic style stuff. I'm like penciling and inking in my sketchbook, and sometimes ruining the paper and all that. And so she was just like, you should, if comics is the thing you want to do, you should just really go for that. And so I kind of had to. It took a while, but I had to kind of unlearn all the fine art school programming and be like, maybe if I just draw something that I just want to draw, maybe I can kind of find my voice in that. And then maybe, not that, the end goal is to have something to say with my art, but maybe I will have something to say once I'm doing something that I actually want to do. So
I was wondering about that, how much the fine artwork influenced, like what your cartooning looked like before the fine art period, and then when you came back to it, was it like on pause, or did the fine art inform your work?
So at first, the first pages I ever tried to fully draw, I should actually show those pages one day, because it was absurd. It was like an absurd amount of detail. Everything was like rendered as though it were some kind of like a high-end figure drawing class. It was stuff that I really loved doing. So I had no shorthand. I didn't realize that when I'm looking at a comic book, I'm not looking at how somebody actually draws. I'm looking at the shorthand, their deadline style or whatever. I had no understanding of that. So I'm thinking, if I'm going to draw a guy walking down the hallway, then I have to render absolutely every single detail of this hallway and the figure and everything else. And I'm still unlearning this, but I'm, realizing that, this is a terrible idea. And it was just extremely exhausting just to do one little sample page. I'm just going to show to an artist to be like, hey, is this good? Actually, Brian Stillfreeze actually was the final nail in the coffin on that kind of idea. Where he just, well, he looked at it and he was just like, this is great, but he was like, this is exhausting. He's like, this is like I can feel the exhaustion of how long this took you. I should know that by looking at it. And I was just like, oh my God.
So yeah, my eyes are crossing because people are saying stuff in the chat that I want to get to, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet. So, but Sean, I want to kind of like dig a little deeper into like I'm wanting to hear about the jump. So you were kind of getting your act together. Okay, I think this is what I want to do now. I think it's a really great story to hear that you had people in your corner who were actively pushing you to do what you felt in your heart that you wanted to do. Generally, you hear that people are just like, like doing this solo against the winds.
Yeah.
So it's always great to hear when people are actually in your corner. So what was the catalyst? Like, did you go to a comic book convention to show somebody your work? Did you send in samples? Like, how did you get into the business?
So when my wife was going to school, I would sometimes just kind of sit in on some of her classes, and and one of the teachers, it was John Griffin, and he was an extremely good illustrator, and he even did some small amount of indie comic art for himself that looked incredible. And so she had shown some of my work to him, and he said he'd be interested in giving me like a critique, just like a little portfolio review. And so I've been working on these pages, these massively detailed pages that I thought were probably masterpieces at the time, right? So and I show it to him, and he's looking at it, and he's just like, it's like, no, this is good. I mean, you need to remember that you're not just drawing pretty pictures, you have to actually tell a story. And so which was completely lost on me back then, because I grew up with the Jim Lee and Image guys, and there was no story there. It was just beautiful, immaculate artwork.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. And so, or at least really stylized. So
impactful or something.
Yeah, exactly. It was really humbling experience. And so just being told, like, you can have pretty pictures all day, but if you can't tell a story, if I can't tell what's going on, then it's you're really putting in a lot of effort for nothing. And so I was just like, oh man, that's hard. But it was an honest critique. So he did say though that regardless of that, you right now should be trying to work somewhere. And that kind of gave me a push to be like, man, I should be like, am I ready to submit my portfolio to places? I had no idea even how to do that. So I just kind of would scour the internet for any independent publisher that would accept online portfolios. And it came down to two. It was St. James Comics. I don't think they're around anymore, but there was another place called Terminus Media out in Atlanta, Georgia, and those two brought me on. And so, and mind you, the teacher warned me. He was just like, the pay is either going to be low or not there. So just be don't leave your job yet. Don't. So I do it. I go ahead and submit my stuff, and those two companies get back to me, and it turned like the Terminus Media job actually turned into a paid job because they had done some work, I think, for the government of Georgia recently, and that had gotten them some cash. So they randomly called me one time when I was still working on their book, and they were like, "Hey, what's your page rate?" And in my mind, I'm like, I have no idea what a page rate is.
Page rate.
Yeah, and I was just like, and then they're asking me to send them an invoice, and I'm just like, what? I'm like, what are you talking about? So I quickly go online and look up some examples of what an invoice for an artist looks like, and I Frankenstein something together to send them. And and this is after like doing like talking about like what a page rate is and that I should be paid. And so that was very clumsily turned out to be my first like paid gig in comics. So
What year
I'm
was
still
this?
friends with a lot of those guys today. This was, oh man, what year? That's
I don't
probably 2012.
Okay.
No, yeah, either 2011 or 2012,
It's funny
where I
that
actually got paid work.
it's funny you bring up money, right? Because I think, you know, maybe to a lot of fans, it's just like they forget that people have to, pay their light bill, you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
but also it's it's been said a million times that no one gets into this business to get rich, and
no,
almost to your
no,
story, like you're like, oh wow, I get paid. It's like a bonus.
yeah,
You know what I mean? I get paid to do this.
yeah.
So was there a point in your early career where you were kind of like trying to figure out maybe, I don't know if you have this now, a ratio of effort versus how much your page rate is? Because I know you
Mm.
talked earlier about like, I was putting so much into every panel that you had to find a style that kind of matched what they were paying you. Did you go through that kind of thing in your head?
Yeah. I mean, I think I still do, but I think I'm in the place, at least right now, where it's just like I'm not com I am concerned with how much I'm being paid when I take on a job. Don't
Sure,
get me wrong.
sure.
But it's also a thing where I'm also considering other things, like am I drawing this thing digitally? Like, and if so, what kind of effort is that going to entail? That informs my page rate. Like, um, if I'm doing it traditionally, that's going to inform my page rate. And honestly, I'm probably going to ask for more from doing it traditionally. If every single line on that paper has to be put down traditionally, I'm like, that takes more time. I gotta, because
Mhm.
now like my girlfriend's become my wife, and now we have a son, and so like anytime that I'm at this drawing board, I'm away from them, so and I have to make sure that there's some compensation for me being away from them so much, especially staying up all night or all day, and
Mhm.
you know not chasing my son around and stuff like that. You gotta I have to make some kind of check and balance against that. They have to be able to benefit if they're going to be without me a little bit.
So let's talk a little bit about that. How do you juggle, as they call it in the wilderness these days, work-life balance? Because
Oh,
that's really something that a lot of cartoonists usually don't have a good grip on, and everything kind of comes second after the muse,
yeah.
So how does that work
I
out for you?
I I don't think I have a good grip on it. Like I always consider myself a fairly lazy person. I don't want to do too much hard work, but I find myself working hours on end on one page that probably didn't really require that much. And I've kind of turned into a workaholic when it comes to comic art and illustration. So um, I don't think I've found a balance. I think I've just come to a place where I'm just like, you just need to kind of do the best you can
Mm,
for
mhm.
today. Um, and just try to trick myself into not thinking too much about tomorrow or what's going to be due next week or what's going to be due next month. And just, just take it day by day and do the best you can with today. That's my balance right now. But there will come a time where I'll just need to have to be a much more concise planner with my time and stuff like that. But that hasn't been today.
When you were talking about the artwork initially didn't have the storytelling element to it. It was striking, maybe very detailed. But when you were adding the storytelling element, how did you do that? How did you go about that? Were there comic cartoonists, comic illustrators who you found influencing that you went, oh wow, I love how Mignola does this, or how another artist does that? Who were your influences?
Yeah, so when I found out I didn't know how to tell a story, I felt like that my influences were probably a huge reason for that. So I kind of one thing that a lot of the fine art training did was it gave me a better appreciation for like much older art styles. Like I became a huge fan of like Gene Colan. I still love that stuff, and I really kind of fell hugely in love with like artists like Bernie Wrightson and stuff like that. It was just and the thing is, like, I should have been influenced by artists like Bernie Wrightson to begin with, because when I was a kid, like my mom's books were like, some of them would have illustrations in it, not just the comic books, but just like regular books. She had like Stephen King's The Stand, and it was the version which he illustrated, and I was hugely into that book. I think of when I was in elementary school, I tried reading this thing, all like 1,500 pages. It was absurd. But I was really drawn into those illustrations, and I wanted to know what was the context of these illustrations, because they were incredible. And I had no idea who the artist was and stuff like that. I was a kid. I had no patience to actually stop and read and stuff like that. But when I started going back and looking at these works, that kind of hugely influenced my storytelling. Just realizing that, if you're going to have a panel that's not going to be super detailed, then you need to make sure that character is super expressive. So stuff like that. So even today, like if I don't at least have a good expression on the character's face, then I'm just like, oh, this panel's trash. Nobody's gonna know what's going on. So I don't know. It's how I think now is so far from what I thought about this stuff then, which I guess is a good thing. It means I guess I'm growing up. So
I love hearing Gene Colan. That's great. What a great choice.
Yeah, his work is very. His work, in some ways, I think has a lot in common with Wrightson, is that it's very emotional in all of his, especially his like Dracula stuff and his Daredevil stuff. And he is a very good storyteller. In fact, it's hard to find. I don't know if you have the big artist edition, but I mean, there's something like 70 something issues, I think, of Tomb of Dracula. And that's just, you don't find anybody doing 70 issues of stuff like that now. So
no.
It's really just so very evocative and very emotional. So yeah, he's a great storyteller. And Wrightson was too. Wrightson was a very, very good storyteller. Did you get into any of the Warren black and white stuff that he did, all the eerie and creepy stuff?
I did for a little while. I still got drawn back to Colan and Wrightson. And it was probably because of that initial like childhood influence, but because it just felt more familiar. But I've kind of, I guess, borrowed bits and pieces of those skills in my own work to try to convey. Usually what I'm going for is I'm trying to make sure that like the reader is gonna feel something from my work. It's like for the image guys, like you, they may not be the best storytellers in the world, but they can make you feel the impact of the work by making it as stylized as they can, or as as flashy as they can. And that is an emotional response. Like you look at this, and you're like, oh my, this is amazing. This is cool. Yeah, so cool. And especially when they started going into like digital coloring and stuff like that, then it was even more polished and it gave you even more of an impact. So I think I try to go for that. Only I want my emotional impact to be within the context of the story. If somebody turns a corner and sees a monster, I want you to feel like that character when they're seeing that monster.
And a lot of the pieces that we have on the screen, I'm not sure if you're able to see them, in everything, the
Oh,
gallery
yeah,
on your
yeah.
website. Did you color all of those yourself?
Some of them I did. That one I definitely did. I am not the fastest colorist in the world, but it's like I stumbled through it. So
Do you flat it and then go back and color it? How do you? It seems like everybody has a slightly different process.
I used to be really dogmatic about the rule of flatting and stuff like that, and but because I have no proper training on how to properly like do the process of coloring, so I think I would just cheat with gray tones. I would just make everything a set gray tone, and then I'm able to just select that gray tone and change the color, and then start rendering.
And so this is all digital, or is this traditional scanned in and then?
I think a lot of this is digital. I didn't color that one, but definitely did all the line work. And
So what is your pipeline look like for how you're working digitally? Are you working in Clip? Are you working in Photoshop? Do you do layouts and then blow them up?
I'm working mostly in Clip Studio. Like I had Photoshop and stuff like that, but as soon as Clip Studio came out, I just threw it all in the trash. So it's I'm mostly in Clip Studio. Even when I'm doing my when I'm working traditional, I'll still like start my thumbnails off in Clip Studio and just put them in blue line, lighten them up as much as I can, and just print them directly on the Bristol.
No, we were talking a little bit right before we started the podcast, and so you said you had 3 pages left. So some artists I know, like Joe Kubert and John Romita Jr., would go and lay out the whole book, right?
Yeah.
The first thing they do is lay out the whole book, and we've talked about this on the podcast. Is Kubert would always lay out his 2 pages together, so you would see how you would go from page to page. So I'm interested to know, like, are you doing them one at a time? Do you lay out a bunch at one time? How do you go about, breaking down your assembly line process of going from layout to penciling to inking?
I try to lay out as many pages as I can ahead of time, and this wasn't how I always did it. Like I used to just try to lay out a page or 2 at a time, and because I just thought, it's too daunting to try to picture the entire story right now, But like I don't like not knowing what I'm gonna have to draw next. And there's just like way too many times where I would just get slowed down if I didn't, and and like my own wife, like my own wife's like my editor at home. Like she'll like look at me and be like, "Why isn't this laid out? What are you doing? You're not gonna know what to draw tomorrow," So I've given that up. I have to at least figure out half the book before I actually like start working on actual pages. Although otherwise it'll just be a nightmare.
I always find this part very interesting with each artist because I myself think of like the layout is the most important because that's the storytelling.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
and then you know you can know what reference, you know, all that stuff. That's the problem, the most important problem solving part of the job. And then if you get caught on a deadline and you gotta trim, well then you know where you can trim because you've laid it
Yeah.
all out. So you can say, well, I can knock out this background. Do I make this head bigger? Whatever.
Yeah.
But if you are sort of like a straight ahead guy where you're just like, I draw page 1, I draw page 2, draw page 3, draw page 4, you can't really work and be as effective in doing a monthly comic, right? Because that's the other thing. It's like if you have to do 22 pages in less than a month, because you never have a month to do 22 pages.
Yeah. No. Wouldn't that'd be so nice? Oh.
There's a, you know, before we run completely out of time, because everybody's caught up in the art, everybody's just like looking at the artwork.
It's so good.
There's a couple of questions in here that we can try to chew through. Some of them are a little kind of further up in your timeline, and some.
All right.
So our good buddy Bill O'Donnell from YouTube says, sorry, we're covering your face, sure. Question for Sean: do you like working on a continuing book or doing a mini series better?
So I've never worked on like a continuous book. The closest I've ever done is our mini series. And I would imagine as long as, because I'm a bit of a process guy, as long as I make sure that I have my thumbnails straight at the beginning of the project, at the beginning of the book, then I can avoid burnout that way. Because if you have your layouts already set, you can kind of, on a day-to-day basis, you can gauge what kind of energy you have and be like, oh, well, no, I think I could just do this pinup today or this splash page today, and you know, tomorrow I'll work on the 12 panel page, you know, and stuff like that when I have more energy. If that would be the only way I think I can avoid burnout, because I don't like when I'm doing it that way. Everything's just kind of, I can kind of gauge how I'm going to approach the book better. If it's all laid out, then I don't have to worry about getting burnt out and stuff like that.
And Sean, what is, and I'm surprised we didn't ask this question already, what's your day-to-day schedule look like? Because it sounds like you just said you jump around a little bit. Are you not actively saying, well, first off, are you generally penciling a project or penciling and inking it, or does it depend on what you're doing? For who you're doing
depends.
it for?
Yeah, it largely depends on what I'm doing. Like for Marvel and DC, I've only done penciling. But for more independent stuff, like if I'm working digitally, of course, I'm just, you know, doing the final line work. I am working on a book with David Walker. It's a Western called The Hate It, and I'm pretty much doing pencils and inks for that. And that's being done traditionally, and so that is. I have done like some like retail exclusive covers that are pencil and ink. So yeah.
And what about, and kind of another big question I have for you is like, how are you picking assignments? And are you scheduling your year out to kind of like whoever asks you first, what's interesting you at that point? Do kind of like, you know, the mainstream things have to happen before kind of indie projects? Like, how are you vetting your calendar for the year?
It's not really like who asked me first. It's almost completely based on the project and how much it'll require of me. Like if it's just like if somebody asks like, hey, I have a short 3, 5, 10-page story that I just need you to do, and then I'd be inclined to want to jump on that first because I feel like it'll be a short project and I can get out of the way. But if it's like, a mini series, 5 or 6 issues, each book's 20 pages, stuff like that, then I'll just be like, okay, I need a block of time that I can do that. And the only other things I can probably take on are just like pinup commissions and maybe a cover if I'm offered that at all. So yeah.
And what's the project you want to work on? What would you love to be working on? Like, I know sometimes the projects just come to you and you're like, well, that's the one I'll do because it's available, or that's paying enough. But
Yeah.
all things being equal, what would you would it be work on the Hated or something else?
I would definitely still be working on the Hated. It's like one of my favorite stories to draw. Like I've been lucky to get some projects that I thought were really fun and really incredible. The 3 I think I was the most lucky on as far as indie publishing goes was I did a very long form book called Dark History of Alchemist for Ray Comics, and that was like 80 to 100-page book. Like, and it was, I'd never done anything that long before, but I thought it would be like, because I thought when I first accepted the project that I'm like, I'm a little lazy. I could push myself, get some actual, get some good work habits instilled in me and stuff like that. And, I wanted the challenge of being like really pushed on having to do like strong, good, consistent work week in, week out and stuff like that. And so instead of just like doing projects whenever I get offered or whenever I, can manage the time. And so that was like extremely challenging because it's like, after you do the first 20 pages of the book, you're just like, oh man, that's nice. Then you got like countless more. The script keeps going.
Mile 3 of the marathon.
Yeah. So it taught me a lot of endurance. And you want to be able to turn in good pages. Like you want to be able to give them some like good work that the book will actually can sell for and stuff like that. And I really love doing that book. I'm still super proud of it.
What was the name of that book?
It's Dark History of Alchemist for Ray Comics. And other 2 books besides the Hated was It's None of the Were Spider, and that's only a 30-page book. And the Kickstarter finished up pretty recently for that, and I was extremely proud of that. I really wanted to delve into some like West African mythology and stuff like that, and I had a lot of fun drawing characters that pull from those sources, and my imagination was allowed to run wild with a lot of those characters. So
I have my own questions, and then we'll get back to the chat. But one of my questions is because as a true freelancer, like you're doing you're kind of picking and choosing what you feel like you want to do in whatever amount of time you have available. And I also know that I have a couple questions in my head that a lot of people look at what we do as like, well, Sean, the dream is to do a Marvel book. So,
right.
But it looks like to me like you kind of go wherever you would like to, wherever the compass points you. So, is that true to say?
I'd be lying to think like it's not in my head that the dream job is to do a Marvel book and to get known for any one of those characters. And it was a huge surprise to me that I was offered the Butcher book, and so be honest, like I try to curb myself a little bit and try to I've gotten into a place where I think I just kind of want to tell stories that I think I can tell it
Yeah.
in the best way that I can. Like, I'm not like I don't believe in like destiny or stuff like that, but it's just like, would my artistic voice work well for this story? And like, I guess I get overly concerned with like what am I bringing to the project. To be honest, it's because it it's you can take like an artist like, I don't know, we can take an artist like Rob Liefeld and you can like put him on X-Force and Deadpool and all that stuff, and all that's fine, that's great, but would it work out if you put him on like American Jesus from Mark Millar? Like, might not work out as well. So I'm always a little concerned with that whenever I get offered anything. I'm just like, would the way I tell a story work out for this project? Would anybody like it? Would anybody want to buy it? Would anybody like be impacted in any way by it? So
we have a couple more questions, and we're chewing up the clock, Sean. I hope you've been enjoying this. We've had a really
I
fantastic
have.
time
Yeah.
talking to you.
Yeah.
I saw our buddy Joe Illage is in the chat. Hey Joe, and that made my mind turn to editorial for a minute. And because you've been kind of all over the map, and I'm sure dealing with, say, Marvel or DC editorial and a self-publisher who is putting together money to pay you to do something for them, I'm sure the input is different, and maybe even how much leeway you have, or even just they go, hey man, do whatever you want, I'm just happy you're here. Can you talk about the differences in editorial on different projects and kind of what you prefer to have on a project?
So I think that, so I was doing indie comics for a long time before I ever touched anything from Marvel or DC. So, and I was lucky enough to work with a lot of writers and creators that like had a vision for what they wanted to do. And so if there was anything that I did that kind of walked outside of that, then they would let me know. They would give me some notes, and I kind of prefer that. I kind of prefer notes. Like, I don't want to. Don't get me wrong. I love being allowed to do whatever I want, but I also it's great being a nice boat just sailing on the oceans. But if you don't have an anchor, you can't stop. So I actually prefer notes. I have had friends who are artists that have tried comics and mostly indie comics, and and they would get like thrown back whenever they get like one note about something, and I'd just be like, "Are you kidding me?" Like,
how dare you? How dare you question my brilliance?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I'm not. I'm not a mark for myself. Like, I'm not the best artist in the world, and I'm certainly not above any kind of editing or any kind of changes that just need to be done. It's not necessarily, if it's my story and I'm creating it and stuff, then it's about me. But if it's something, if it's a character that's been around for like 100 years, then it's not about me anymore. It's how is this story going to be told? If it's for an indie creator that's still building a brand around this thing, it's not about me anymore. It's they're trying to build something, and I want to be able to participate. I don't want to take over.
Well, all right. I have all these questions. All right. So my next question is, with that, during the lead up process before you're like turning in final art, are you kind of doing a back and forth with whoever your project lead is? Are you turning in your thumbs first for review? Are you turning in like rough pencils before you go to tight pencils? Or are you looking for input? Is there like an argument after the inks come in that, what do you mean you don't like these faces? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how does that conveyor belt work for you?
So I try my best to be as easy as possible to work with. I don't argue. Even if I have a difference of opinion, I will like I'll just sketch something out really quickly on my iPad and send it back. I'm like, what do you think of this? You know? And sometimes I'll just be like, well, maybe if I send this first before I send what they want me to send, maybe they'll be more inclined. But no, I typically I've just only ever been asked to send like thumbnails, and then I can just get the go ahead to do finished pages. I try not to be like I try not to make my thumbnails look like too much like chicken scratch. I really do try my best to make them look like reasonably understood on some level. And I've been fortunate so far. So,
Mike, how have you seen this process change through the kind of like I guess the decades of comics, like where people inputting stuff in different fashions than what they're doing now? You think, like when you were at Marvel, like
you mean as far as layouts?
yeah, like what were they expecting versus kind of what you may get these days?
Well, I mean, it really was deadline dependent.
Mm-hmm.
You might do. Well, they used to have stages. They used to have shakedowns, breakdowns, right? And then you had full pencil. So shakedowns was almost like just breaking down the story and very sort of like rough placement. And then you had breakdowns, which is like everybody sees, the John Buscema rough with no blacks, right? So depending upon deadline, and maybe your relationship with the writer, because again, a plot could be like a Chris Claremont plot, which is like thick, or it could be, 2 pieces of paper, pages, and I think that it's pretty much the same, again, depending upon your relationship with your creative partners and the needs of the job. Do you just need to go through and break it down so the writer can write, right? Because not every writer has a lot of experience writing. Are you adapting something? Like I was in discussion with somebody to do a book. There was a book. And they sent me stuff to look at, and it was like, okay, there's way too much stuff here to like what they thought was going to fit on the page. So the internet's great because you could sit down, like you said, Sean, you could sit on your iPad, you could go through, blue, 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 send it off. They can see it, because once it's that's the thing about comics. When it's a script, it's all abstract. It can be drawn by anybody, interpreted by anybody. But once it's down on paper, it's your interpretation. It's a very specific interpretation of storytelling, right? And so something that is kind of nebulous, once you have a layout, you could start saying, oh, yeah, maybe this is not so clear, or we need more space, or we need more pages, or we need to chop down the copy or leave more room for copy. So, yeah, I mean, I think what digital has done is it allowed artists to have more control over the final product. Not like sending it away and then you see it in print and like, oh, this looks like crap. You know what I mean? Because that used to happen, right? You would pencil something, you'd send it away. You wouldn't see it until it was in print. Maybe you get the editor to send you Xeroxes, but not every job was that way, right? So, and then it's also what you're interested in doing, some artists like to have full script because they go, if I'm doing a plot, then I'm doing the writer's job and I need to get some of the writer's, money, right?
Mhm.
A lot of the old school guys were that way. Like, what is this plot thing? That makes no sense to me, right? Other people, you know, you were sort of wasting your dollars if you're giving Jack Kirby a full script, or Gene Colan, or some of these other people. If you give them a plot, you really unleash their total creativity, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. Just kind of like connecting all these dots. So there's a lot of conversation in the chat about Marvel work, and you know, sometimes that's like the thing that really kind of like shakes up the jar of bees, is like, well, let's talk about some Marvel stuff. And also there's also the thing of, you know, being a person of color in this business.
Yeah.
There's some things that go along with that, where even as far as the fans are concerned, uh, they may be looking for a certain authenticity from a black artist on a black book or a black
Yeah.
character, or things like that. So before I get into some of these questions, I want to ask: have you kind of come across, not necessarily, I don't want like a war story or anything like that, but have you come across anything in your travels with some of the mainstream things of like, hey, you know what, Sean, we're interested in having you work on this book. Could you give us some fresh design concepts? Or, you know,
Mhm.
go nuts. Or I don't know,
Yeah.
whatever they would say like that. Have you had any conversations like that with any
Uh,
projects?
Never go nuts. When I got the when they offered me the Bishop book, it was it's just literally the story is Bishop's going to another timeline, you know, as he does,
Mm,
and he shows up in the world where the all the X-Men are all black, and
mm,
so and I was they told me early on that they just kind of wanted me to just design some characters for the X-Men, and those are the main two reasons why I accepted that book. Is one is Bishop, and two, I can design X-Men. So um, I, to be honest, if they told me to go wild, I don't think I would have listened to that anyway. I think I would have tried to like really like stick it into the '90s era of X-Men that I did, because that just made sense to me, because that's literally when Bishop met these characters. So
mhm,
if they had, it would have made no sense to me if I had like gone too crazy and made some of these characters unfamiliar. Um, that's another thing that's I try to keep in mind if I'm working for Marvel or DC, is that these characters have like a they have an emotional impression on their fans. It's not something that, you know, that fans are actively sitting down every single day contemplating on some kind of, you know, philosophical level. They love these characters because of a way they made them feel. So um, I try to go into it respecting that, and you know, not take myself too seriously on what I want to do, and just trying to have fun all at the same time. And, you know.
Well, if you say Spider-Man,
Hmm.
everybody in their mind has an image of who Spider-Man is,
Hmm.
like a real person, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you say Wolverine or X-Men, or I mean, even given that you might be from a slightly different decade,
Yeah.
those characters are overall pretty consistent, right?
Hmm.
And they have a pretty consistent place in people's minds, right? Um,
Yeah.
and and so I always sort of felt like you are. It's like if you're playing the role on Broadway of Spider-Man, there is a long history of Spider-Man, and now you are inhabiting the role, so you have some, like you said, some respect for the role and some respect for the fandom
Hmm.
of that character. And I don't think, especially in the majors, nobody really wants to go crazy now, because that, you know, everything is all kind of bottlenecked, and you
Mhm.
know, they're trying to make sure that they've got all these multiple storylines that then they can turn into this other thing that it can be going to the movies, and it's like everything
Yeah.
is much more penned in the 80s was probably the last time where it was a lot more crazy and free, because wasn't that, you know, $1 billion expectation, right? Like anything you do for the majors now is a $1 billion expectation. Some storyline you do today, 5 years from now, can be turned into a movie that makes $1 billion. That's a completely different way of completely different, you know. And in fact,
no pressure.
Well, there's much less freedom, and at least to me, there's less freedom, and there's more. Here's your part. Here's a puzzle. We're making this big puzzle. Here's your part.
Right.
You get to do this part, right? You got to hit the mark. Do this part, which is very different now because you're really doing corporate comics, right? So when you're working for Marvel and in DC, not so much Image, because I think Image is much more. Well, actually, most of the guys aren't. You know, they put out way more product now than the original 7 guys. You know, doing stuff. So
all right, we're going to jump into. You ready for it? Ciao! Lightning round. Question Palooza time. So what this means, Sean, is that we want to get you out of here so you can go pee. And there's a lot of questions here. So I'm going to try to just like knock these out, and you just kind of like swing at them, and we'll just keep it moving. All right. So we'll try to keep it fast. So I was trying to find the right rhythm for the last part of these questions, and I think that's something that a lot of fans, especially modern fans, want to know. Like, yo, who's approving these designs sometimes? So Eternity Forever, one of our buddies here goes, Sean, this is a stupid question, but what's up with Bishop's hair? Why is there no consideration for a natural look? You never see Clark Kent look like Bob Ross.
No.
And hold on, there's a second part. And I know Will Portacio designed him with straight hair. So is it artist's preference or editorial decisions for the way a black man's hair should look? And that might be a lot for you to answer, but like maybe give us your take on it.
Well, the design I'm drawing with Bishop is inherited. Like I think artist Russell Darderman designed the current look of Bishop. I would love to draw old school Bishop with the perm and everything, and it'd be great. I think on the first issue I did sneak that version of him in there just because it gave me a chance to. But I think, I mean, without telling too much, there is going to be a lot more future consideration for the texture of hair, particularly Black people's hair, in their comics going forward. You might start seeing it a lot. Because I was definitely encouraged to be like, you know, especially designing the Black versions of these X-Men, to be as natural as I wanted to be, and I was just like, oh, okay. So, which I had a lot of fun doing, to be honest. So there will be a lot more of that going forward with Marvel, particularly, I think.
Sometimes I think about starting a fan page called Miles Morales' Fade in Lineup, because it seems like there's a lot of people online who are just super concerned about a haircut of a character, and I get it, you know what I mean, but like kind of like to the degree that a lot of people are kind of scrutinizing those kind of points, I think is a really interesting modern conundrum. So here's our next question. Rasman, what's up, Rasman? Rasman and I go way back. Were you, Sean, disappointed with the cancellation of your Luke Cage miniseries with Jose Anderson?
Oh, very much. Very much. I loved drawing that book, or at least my portion of it. It was, and plus, just like I really enjoyed working with Jose. Like, he's an incredible writer, incredible artist. it's a really different thing when you're working with a writer who thinks visually. It's always a different experience, and he was giving me a lot of fun visuals to draw. So I really wanted people to see that book, and yeah, I I would still love to see that book published even to this day. And I don't know if they ever will. I don't know if they'll like do one of those. What's the thing Disney used to do when they used to have re-release old cartoons like from the Disney Vault or something like that. Maybe
Right,
there's a Marvel Vault they can start or something. That'd be great.
All right, cool. That was a good answer. Thanks. And thanks, Resme. Good to see you. D. Brett Gibson goes, Sean, what goes into planning a cover? Can you send us through your cover process?
Usually, well, it depends on who I'm doing it for, but it usually I have to just get like, sometimes I'll get as little as just like a plot of the story, and that plot can be anywhere from one page to just a few sentences. And then I'll get some like reference of all the characters that are involved, and sometimes I wouldn't get like necessarily a plot. Like they'll just, especially in independence, they'll just kind of send over like a lot of character designs of what the character I'm supposed to draw and what they were able to do, and that's it. And they'll be like, go crazy, and I'll just be like, oh, are you sure?
And Sean, how many designs would you drop on a cover? Like, would you do an A, B, C, and D draft and let them pick, or do you just nail one thing and just hope for the best? How do you normally go through that process?
Yeah, I offer no more than 3. I learned a real hard lesson one time when I made like a lot of different options and stuff like that. It's way too hard to make a solid decision when you give them way too many options. You just give them your strongest 3, and don't offer anything that you don't want to draw though.
That's the one they pick.
Don't. Yeah, they will pick the one thing. If you hate drawing a particular thing, don't make a thumbnail of that.
So it'll be like the Tour de France with dinosaurs or something like that.
The one you want to draw is the one that you do a better drawing of the rough, because then that kind of tricks them. They'll go, oh yeah, that looks cool.
Yeah, they'll try that. They'll conceptualize it better. They'll just be like, yeah, this looks good.
That's fantastic.
Transformers, right. Oops, all motorcycles.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, D. Brad. Dom Gomez sneaks in under the Indiana Jones wall right at the end and says, how long did it take for your art to be consistent issue to issue instead of drastic improvements and stylistic changes like over time? How did you figure out how to be consistent on a project?
I think I'm still figuring that out, but I think one thing what I used to do is I used to just reference my previous pages a lot, but now I try to be much more conscious of when I'm drawing. I try not to let my I try to, like, if I'm drawing a character that I need to purposefully remember has like high cheekbones, curly hair and stuff like that, then I try to make sure that I remember that, and I try to keep the details, like those details, that simple. Like just 2 things I have to remember about that character: they have high cheekbones and curly hair. If I can nail 1 or 2 things about that character's look consistently, then that's all you have to worry about. And that's
Do you make a model sheet?
Sometimes, like with the for the Bishop miniseries, I had to make, just for my own sanity, I had to make like some quick model sheets just to make sure I'm drawing them right. Because I made the mistake of making some characters a little too detailed, and just so I had to reference it whenever I'm like, okay.
Right. Okay, cool. All right, and our last questions, and then we'll start to wrap, is from our good buddy Jamal. What up, Jamal? Jamal says, do you prefer pencils to inks, or does it not matter? Your work looks tight enough to print right from the pencils. So, what would you rather prefer, Sean?
Oh man, I would prefer inking. Like I would ink myself every time. It's I tend to make more natural decisions when I'm inking, and what I found myself doing a lot of the time is I'm trying to make marks that I would think that I can do with an ink brush and maybe a quill or a fine line or something like that, and I'm trying to do it with a pencil, and sometimes it doesn't work out. Um, so I found myself like, you know, what's that term when you're trying to draw a line? Like you're not supposed to pet your lines. I found myself petting my lines a lot when I'm drawing with a pencil because it's like I'm trying to make it look like something I would do with ink. I'm trying to
Mhm.
get the same line variants, and sometimes you know you have to. A mechanical pencil isn't going to do the same line variants that a Pentel brush pen will. It just won't.
Yeah,
You got to make
yeah.
it do that.
You got to make it. You got to make it dance sometime.
Yeah,
Cool,
yeah.
cool. Thanks, Jamal. That was fantastic. What I like to say here almost every week is, where'd the time go? I don't know where the time went. Sean, you're a fantastic guest.
Thank
Um,
you, thank you.
and I hope that wasn't too painful, but I think it was really great. Kind of speaking to, you know what, like somebody who is actively right now in this business drawing Marvel books and DC books. And you know, it's great that we get to talk to all these different voices from the creative sphere. But you know, you're in the trenches right now doing the stuff, and the work looks fantastic. Sean,
Thank you.
what you actively have things on the rack. What would you like to promote or tell people to go pick up at the shop in the next week or two or month or two?
Oh, Bishop War College issue 2 is still currently out. There still should be copies of the second printing for issue 1 still available. Issue 3 should be out in a couple, maybe next week. I think next week. Am I
Um,
remembering that right? No, it's the 19th. It's the 19th. So yeah. Um, besides that, I think there's going to be physical copies of It's None of the Were Spider out pretty soon. I'm still toiling on issue 2 of The Hated, so kind of past the halfway mark on that book. So that should maybe come out later in the year. But
okay. Oh, Tim Fielder. All right, last question. And I'm just doing it.
oh yeah,
I'm doing
yeah.
this for Tim because I love you, man. So, but you're killing me. Tim Fielder says, "Hey Sean, much respect for your work. You're known for doing very detailed art. Wondering if you might do a long form graphic novel with even more detailed work. How do you feel about that?"
Yes. So like whenever I do get the time, like I do have like I think it's probably 10 or 12 pages done of like a personal story that I've always wanted to do. And I've shared some of it before on Facebook and stuff like that. I'll probably share it again pretty soon,
Mm-hmm.
just to see if people are still into it or not. But yeah, I definitely would. I definitely would.
Well, that's fantastic, and we would definitely love to have you back
All right.
on the podcast. So, um, I think that's it. Any last words, Mike? Anything to say to the people out there or to Sean, our great guest?
Go buy his comics.
Yes, I love
Yes,
it.
all of them, every last
Hey,
one.
Everyone, yes, right. Get a box, a little short box just for Sean's work.
Steve, anything on our way
Yeah,
out the
last I
door?
checked, the Hated #1 was sold out. So I think they're going to go back maybe with when the Hated #2 Kickstarter happens. Is there going to be a Kickstarter for #2?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
sweet. So everyone keep an eye out for that.
I love it. All right, you guys, let's close the doors. Thank you so much, Sean, for your rapt attention tonight, and thank you, viewers.
Thank you.
If you're new to the podcast, we do this every week, y'all. So please like, subscribe, hit the alert button so you get notified every time we set up the signpost. We set up the bat signal so you guys know what we're going to do this week. So share, like, tell your friends. This is the greatest thing going today, and you can be a part of it. Thank you, guys. And Sean, you're going to do it with us, right? We're about to do the thing, and then we're going to get out of here.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're still in a pandemic, and I would be remiss if I did not ask you lovely people to suds them up. Wash those curvy hands. Yeah, put them up, Sean. Let's see those hands. There. Oh, wow.
Oh, taking up the whole screen.
That's the hand of doom right there. I love it.
I should use this for reference.
That's right. See you next week. Thanks so much.